This is Karen with newclevelandradio.net, and it's time for Avoid the Maze. And here we are in 2023, and you know what? We are all still looking for the right angles. We start going in one way and we say, hey, is that the direction I really want to be going in? Or could I do something else with my life? And this is an interesting part of this century. We are seeing more and more people following their passions, especially my guest, Kevin Palmieri. I did say that right, didn't I?
Good.
Wonderful. I'm terrible at names. I
No
tell
worries.
everybody. And I met Kevin through a group called podmatch.com. And when I read his bio, it was like, you're so young and you've done so much. And yet there are so many people your age, much older, who are just sitting around today saying, how can I change? So give us a little bit of background, Kevin, because, most of us do fight change, even though that's what we want to have in our life. So how do we go about it?
One of the interesting things, this is the important thing to understand, Karen, no matter what, change is going to happen. It's not even that we resist change. I think a lot of us don't understand that change it's unavoidable. In 5 years, you will be different than you are today. The question is, will you be different in the ways that you want to be different? So I think that's an important understanding right off the top. It's that deeper layer of change is inevitable. Whether you're in control of it or not is optional. I think we can throw that out there. So today I am the host and the CFO and the founder of a very successful quote unquote podcast. But for me, I grew up in a single parent household. I was raised by my mom and my grandmother. I didn't know my dad. I didn't meet my dad until I was 27 years old. And obviously that played a big part in who you see in front of you today. Didn't go to college. I knew I didn't want to go to college, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. So I job hopped for a while. Ended up finding a very lucrative opportunity in a construction type industry. Made $100,000 at 26. Ended up sitting on the edge of a bed the next year debating suicide because I was so miserable. I was so unhappy. I was so out of alignment. I didn't feel like I had any purpose, any passion. I just wasn't excited for life. I ended up quitting my job the next year and then going all in on this new podcast that I had created. And then over the next 6 years, we figured out, okay, we have to turn this into a business now if we want to put food on the table. And I have a big appetite. I like to eat. So we have to do that. And really, that's kind of the elevator story of it. I always like to go from where I am today to where I started because nobody starts where they are.
Absolutely.
I don't want anybody to see where I am and my perceived level of success and say, oh, I could never do that because this is not where I started. And honestly, year over year, it's like yesterday I wasn't really as successful as I am today. So it depends on when you see somebody, really.
Well, and you're using a word that I love, but it has a different interpretation for all of us. And the word is success.
Yeah.
And I remember growing up, graduating high school, going on to college, and my idea of success was getting my degree in communications and broadcasting and being on network TV. Now, this is before the Barbara Walters and all those who really paved the way. And my parents looked at me like I was insane. It was like, you're not going to do that. We're not going to waste our money sending you to college to get a degree that you'll never use. So we're going to tell you what, we're going to pay for you to go get your degree in education. At least you would have a stable job. Hopefully you'll get married and some guy will take care of you. That's not what I wanted. I mean, sure, did I want to fall in love and, have a family? Yes. But I wanted to be in this field for whatever reason. So for 2 years, I lied to my parents about the classes I was taking in school. And I got my associates in communications. And I was so proud of it. I said, you got to come to my graduation because I still have 2 more years I want to do. And my mother said, pack your bags. You're coming home. Didn't understand it back then. Understand it today wholeheartedly because my parents were looking out after me. Okay. They didn't know any women that were truly in broadcasting, except maybe the weather girl who would point, and that was it. So today our society is a little bit different. Our society is encouraging people to follow their dreams. But I love what you said. You had to put food on your table. So you had to go out and get a real job. And then you found out that that job basically was killing you from the inside out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So when you were going through that angst, I'm sure it felt more than angst, how did family and friends respond? Because typically we say the absolute wrong thing at the wrong time. Was your family supportive, or what did they say?
Yeah. So this is the interesting thing. And I've said this for most of my life. And I think for me, it's probably not typical for the human experience. But the thing that's held me back most in my life has been myself. I've had wonderful people around me. I'm very blessed to have supportive people. If you don't believe in me and the mission, you're not in my life. And it just, again, I know that sounds hardcore, but that's the level that I'm at, where I'm all in on this thing. And if you're not all in on me, I don't really have time for that. Now, I do remember when I lost my job and I went and saw my mom and my grandmother right after, I told them, I said, hey, I left my job and I'm going all in on this podcast thing. My grandmother said, you're going to get another job, right? And I said, I will never punch a time clock for somebody else as long as I live. And I know how nervous she was. She was unreasonably nervous. So I have nothing but appreciation for that. But when I left my job, I moved in with my best friend, who's also an entrepreneur. And it was some of the best times of my life, even though I was broke. Nobody was listening to the podcast. I was single as humanly possible. There wasn't a lot of success happening. But I do think I was fulfilled. And that was a feeling that I had never really felt before. And I think that people around me started to see, okay, interesting. Kevin's the happiest, most fulfilled, most competent, highest vibration version of himself. What's going on here? And I think people can see that. Certain people can see that. So I didn't have the typical, I guess, perceived typical reaction from people around me. Some people definitely thought I was crazy, but the people closest to me said, good for you for doing what you love. Good for you for trying. You can always go back, right? You can always go back if this doesn't work, but you can't go back in 50 years. You can't make up for that time. So I'm very blessed that I've had those people around me. And that's one of the reasons I try to give advice based on the advice I received. Will you succeed at everything you try? Most likely not. Will you regret not trying more than the discomfort of failing along the way? I believe so. I believe you will. So I think it's worth trying at least. In 5 years, the last thing Karen wants to say is, I could have been a podcaster. I could have been an entrepreneur. I could have been a business owner, because you don't really get that opportunity again later in life, circumstantially.
You know, this conversation is coming at the most perfect time. And I totally get where you're coming from, because when I left corporate America, I basically was pushed out the door. Everybody in my corporate circle were anywhere from 15 to 20 years younger than me. And it wasn't until one day when I couldn't hear a conversation. And it's because people were whispering around me. And I've been wearing hearing aids for 20 years. It's never happened to me before, because people accommodate. All of a sudden, they weren't accommodating. And I wasn't telling them what the problem was. That was my fault. But what happened in the long run was, all of a sudden, people started seeing me as old. You're not capable of doing your job. Maybe you should take a leave of absence. Maybe you should go find another job. And that's what I realized. I wasn't happy in my job. That's why I wasn't telling anybody that I was faltering, because my head kept saying, you don't want to be here. But yet I was doing my job because I knew how to do it, but I wasn't happy.
Yeah.
And it was my son who said to me one day on the ride home from work, Mom, you're the most depressed woman I've ever met. What's your problem? And I thought, this can't be. Moms can't be depressed. And I broke down, realized I was, and said, okay, I can either stay down here on the ground and have my son be confused about who I am, or I can go out and find myself. And I've had people say to me ever since I started this 10 years ago, so how successful are you? What are your ratings? And my comment is, I get up every day. I do shows. I'm successful. I'm doing what makes me feel good. And I'm finding more people like yourself who are encouraging, and you're saying, yeah, why would you go back to a job that made you feel miserable? Even if you made really good money. I mean, all of us want to make good money, don't we? But if you're miserable, you're not spending it. You're not enjoying it.
Yep.
So I totally understand where you came from. The question is, what is your mission? Because I know you love to help people. But helping people is a big syndrome.
Yeah.
So what is it that you, Kevin, want to build on?
I would say our ultimate mission is to put holistic self-improvement into the pocket of every human being on the planet every single day for free from anywhere and anywhere in the world. I mean, that really is, we do 7 episodes a week, not because I want to. I mean, I do love it, but it's because there's 7 days in a week and we want to help people grow every single day. So for us, I think the ultimate goal is to make self-improvement accessible and acceptable to everybody who wants it. There's a lot of people out there that think self-improvement is like a cult. It's like, well, you're going to this event and you're going to get better and you're going to talk about things. Like, isn't that a little weird? And there's also some people on the planet, many people on the planet, that want to improve themselves, but they don't have the financial means to do it. Coaching is expensive, right? Books can be expensive. I mean, $20 to somebody who lives in a different country might be a lot of money for them. So that's really our goal, is to say, look, if you want to get better, we have a place for you to get better. No matter how much money you make, no matter how much you've studied self-improvement, there will always be a place for you. That is our goal in a nutshell, and that is why we work so incredibly hard for it. It's not about us. That's the interesting thing, is like, yeah, I'm more quote unquote successful than I've ever been, but it's only because I've helped more people than I've ever helped. That's the only reason why. It's impact. It's mastery, it's impact, and then it's money. Mastery, get very, very, very good at something. Impact, deliver value to other human beings in a way that they value, and then you'll collect something at the end of that, whether it's good vibes, good feelings, emotions, fulfillment, or money. So yeah, that's what it is for us. Self-improvement for the people who really want it.
And self-improvement comes in so many different packages. I remember, probably maybe, it's probably close to 40 years ago, after my first son was born. I had put on a lot of weight during the pregnancy, and I woke up one morning and said, I don't want to look like this anymore. So my self-improvement was exercising, but learning to enjoy the exercise so that it wasn't painful. And that was my self-improvement journey. Except it only took care of what was on the outside, not what was on the inside. And I didn't realize that at first. I kept thinking, well, now that I look better on the outside and I look in the mirror and I like what I see, then I should be feeling good. And I couldn't understand why I was miserable. And my husband at the time was miserable with me because I didn't have the words to explain things. And so our marriage fell apart. And again, I took on the blame. It had to have been me. Well, it was to some degree because I only took care of the outside image, not the inside image. And so I'm hoping our listeners, and especially when they go to your site and listen to your podcast, understand that it's not necessarily the photo that we're looking at that needs to be photoshopped. Okay. It's what is inside that photo that needs to come out. So give me an example of something that you would talk about on your podcast that, might trigger somebody to say, hey, maybe coaching would help me.
It's very interesting that you use the inner game versus the outer game. I always say that, I think about it as like a status. So is your internal status aligned with your external status? Are you driving a car that looks like a Ferrari, but inside, the interior is completely messed up and there's no engine, there's no cup holders? I think a lot of people are experiencing that one way or another, whether they feel really good internally, but they don't feel great about the external, or they feel really good about the external and not the internal. I felt really good about my external in my mid-20s. I was a bodybuilder. I was in the best shape of anybody I knew. Internally, I was miserable. So the delta between the internal and external status can lead to a lot of things. And that's literally something we would talk about on the podcast. Something we've been talking about a lot lately is the layers of self-belief versus self-worth. Somebody might have a high level of self-belief that says, I can build this mansion on the side of this mountain overlooking the ocean, and it's going to be the nicest mansion ever. That is belief, not belief in your ability to build something. Self-worth is how do you stop the wrong people from getting into your mansion and spilling beer on your floor and tearing up your carpet and knocking holes in your walls. I think a lot of us don't understand that we have a misaligned level of self-worth. And you'll hear people say, well, I want to have high self-worth. I think the right frame, and this is just my theory, I think the right frame is you want to have accurate self-worth. I don't want to have high self-worth beyond my capabilities, because then I end up entitled and delusional. I also don't want to have very low self-worth that is way lower than my abilities, because I'm delusional then too, and I'm self-deprecating. So I think the ultimate goal is to figure out where is the truth for all of us. I really think that's the name of the game. So that's an example of what we talk about on the podcast, but that's really what we're digging into is how do you find your own unique truth so you can move through life with that?
And, when you're talking about your self-worth, I know the way I was brought up, you identified your self-worth by what other people said you were good at. Mm-hmm. And I'll never forget, my mother one day said to me, you are so good at being a helper. So what did I become? My mother's helper. Any place I went, I volunteered. I'm going to help. I'm going to help. And then I started feeling like I was being taken advantage of because I was always helping. And a lot of times when you offered, oh, do you want to go sweep the floor? Do you want to go scrub something? And it was like I was missing out on what was happening because I was helping so much. And then I would wake up and say, wait a second, is this all I'm good for? And that's the difference between back then and today. I think we are teaching our children, at least today, that you don't have to wait for somebody to tell you you're good at something. But it's also not walking around saying, hey, I'm the greatest, and I can do this better than everybody else.
Yeah, it's a very fine line. And that the other weird thing too is even other people telling you you're really good at something doesn't actually help you unless you believe it. That's the weird thing is, somebody might say you're the best podcaster there is. And if you don't believe it, you're going to think to yourself, I really hope they don't find out the truth of what I think about myself. And that puts you in a really, really, really weird position. So here's kind of the frame. If you're somebody who has very low self-worth, you have to start making and keeping small promises to yourself. Simple stuff. It doesn't have to be anything crazy, but like, if the alarm goes off, I'm going to get up. I'm not going to hit snooze, and I'm not going to regret it, and I'm not going to beat myself up. I'm going to go to the gym, or I'm going to have that tough conversation, or whatever it is. I'm going to learn for 5 minutes. You have to build the self-belief in yourself, the belief in you as a human being, right? I value myself as a human being enough to work on myself. If you're somebody who is way over and you're entitled, you've got to go do some hard stuff because nothing will humble you like something that you fail at. And that's one of the reasons I love the gym so much because the weights don't care. They don't care about your ego and they're either going to get moved or they're not. And it's a very humbling experience. But here's the paradox. Usually somebody with low self-belief and low self-worth is afraid to take action. And when you're afraid to take action, you don't get new results that proves to you, hey, you're actually pretty good. Like you're actually pretty good at this. You should keep doing it. Somebody who is very high self-belief, high self-worth, they don't think they need to take action. To my point, they're already too good. They're already good enough. So they're not getting that humility. And it's just very interesting how where you are internally in terms of those states determines the actions you should take externally, but you don't take them even though it's what's best for you. It's weird how the universe and the human condition is set up.
Well, I just took a course this summer on positive intelligence. And I encourage anybody out there who, is going through any kind of, I'm not even going to call it trauma, but questioning who you are and what is important, to look into this, because what I have found is the things that I thought I couldn't do come very easily to me. Okay. I wasn't recognizing that I was doing certain things until I took this course, and I didn't take it the way it was meant to be taken. And the instructor or the coach who walked us through it, I kept apologizing to her. No, I'm not reading all the sections. No, I'm not doing all the exercises. I'm doing what comes naturally, and I'm feeling the success of what I'm learning. And at the end of it, she said, you did it the right way for you. And it was like, really? And she goes, it wouldn't have worked any other way.
No.
And the fact that I keep referring to the things and internally referring to things and saying, whoa, you don't have to think that way. You can take another step. Or you know what? Maybe it is okay just to sit back and do nothing right now. Those are the things that sometimes we don't give ourselves permission for.
Yeah. And it's so hard too, because, and I always say this, some of you listening should not take my advice, because where you are in your life is probably drastically different, or I've never experienced, I don't know what it's like to be a mother. I've never been a mother. I don't know what it's like. I've never experienced that, right? I have 2 cats. That's as close as I've ever come. I've babysat children before, but we're in this weird time where there's a lot of people that are giving blanket statement advice. It's just a blanket of do more. Nobody cares that you're tired, work harder. Like, that's not true for everybody. But there's also the other side that says you should only do what you feel like. Well, that's not necessarily true either. Where is the appropriate level of, we'll just say, output for you? I like that frame. I like to use the frame, the appropriate level of productivity. Whatever that means to you. If you want to have a successful podcast, cool, you got that. You're there. You're there. If you want to double, triple, quadruple, that might take more effort. Right? So it's just, I think contextually, it's important to understand that a lot of people that are giving advice, number one, are giving advice based on their experience. Number two, many people that are giving advice don't understand the experiences of other humans. Number three, many people who don't understand that they don't understand the level of the experience for other human beings. So things get a little bit weird when it comes to taking and, I'll say, filtering advice. It's hard. It's a challenge.
Well, and I think the concept of filtering is the most important part, because you can tell me your story, okay? Doesn't mean you're necessarily giving me advice. You're telling me that this is something that you went through. This is how you reacted to it. And this is where it brought you to. And as I listen to that story, I can say, I've been through something similar. I don't know if I want to do it the same way Kevin did it.
Yep.
But I like what he did. So therefore, I'm going to keep an open mind as I'm trying to make whatever these changes are. And I found that especially in this class that I took, because after the class, we're now on a 6-month maintenance group. And so we've always sort of become friends in the group, and we're just reassuring each other. And there was one woman in the group who I just thought she was the most brilliant person every time I'd listen to her speak. And that was during the class. But now that we are a little more laid back, I've learned so many things about her. I don't look at her as brilliant. I look at her as, intelligent, nice person, a lot that I can learn from. but not necessarily things that I would ever do myself. It doesn't mean I can't learn from her experiences. And that's where I think so many of us cut ourselves off. No, I'm not going to listen to Kevin. He's much younger than I am. He's a male. He's never been a mother. He only knows about cats. Ridiculous. Because there may be something in how you take care of your cats that maybe I should do for my sons.
I love it. I say I'm the ultimate cat dad. That's what I'm going for.
I love it. I love it. So you and your partner in business, are you both like on the same wavelength, or are you yin and yang? Explain how the business works.
Yeah, that's probably the best way to put it. So my business partner, and really think about this. This is my life in a nutshell. Okay. I'm Kevin, did not go to college, right? After high school, that was it for me. I went on and got a job. My business partner, Alan, went to WPI, Worcester Polytech Institute, one of the top technical colleges, I would say, in the world. He went to, it's like a mini MIT. That's where he went, and he got his master's, and he is computer and electrical engineering. He's a genius, and I'm not a genius. So he's way more of the vision than I am. He's the CEO, right? I started the company, but he is the guy. He is the top. And when it comes to making long-term decisions, I always say, you go do that. I trust you. I'm in charge of money because I am a more short-term thinker. I'm always thinking about money. How do we make more money as a business in the most aligned way, adding more value? Now, that's the interesting part, is we are polar opposites when it comes to so many things. But when it comes to the mission, we both want the same exact thing. And we have this agreement with one another that whoever is better at something is going to take the lead. So we have, as of today, 1,207 podcast episodes. I've named probably 1,150 of them. That's my thing. I name the podcast episodes. That's what I do. I come up with the topics. That's what I do. Alan is behind the scenes building the business. So we're very, very different. But here's the thought. We have very similar core values. We have very similar core beliefs. And we have very similar core aspirations. Now, are our personalities different and are our competencies different? Yes, very. But we want the same thing, we believe the same thing, and we value the same things. And I think that's a very important understanding. And I think that's why we work so well together. Have we had arguments? Yeah, minor stuff. But we've had a lot of people tell us having a business partner is the worst thing in the world. It's like, maybe for you, we're going to be fine. I'm not worried about it now. I'm not going to be worried about it in 10 years. You know, we're character-driven men who want to have impact.
Well, and I think you guys are going about it the exact right way. My husband and I have, even though we've had separate jobs, we have worked on many businesses together. Mm. And people have asked us, you know, aren't you about to kill each other? And the answer typically is, like you said, he has his skills. I have my skills. He's not going to do what I do. Right. And I'm definitely not going to do what he does. Now, occasionally, do we do a crossover? Absolutely. Only because by osmosis, we've learned it. And so if we need to jump in, we do. But that is what is so successful in all relationships, is when you realize it's okay that somebody's better at something else. Because is that the something else you want to do? Right. And if it's not, hey, go for it. Yeah. Although the other day, my husband said to me, reason I really don't empty the dishwasher very often is you're better at it than I am. And I said, well, maybe you should try to be better than me.
Right? That's an easy thing to learn. I'm sure there's a bunch of YouTube videos that can help you out. It's pilot and co-pilot. Yeah. That's really what it is. Like, I shouldn't pilot everything, right? I'm the logistics guy. When we travel, I do all of it. I book the flights, I book the Airbnb, I book the rental. If Alan did that, we would literally driving the sea, we wouldn't have the biggest thing, and we have tickets to the event we're going to. Because that's my competency. So, and co-pilot, and I think that's great for every relationship. Because one of the common issues in relationships is people kind of fighting for the the top, right? I should be the leader in the situation. Sure, you can be a leader in this situation. Is it based on merit? Do you have more reps in the arena? Do you have more skills? Let's have that conversation. Here's why you should lead. Here's why I should lead. And if you have that open, honest conversation with somebody, I think it helps, because the last thing, if we are going for, let's say we're going for a successful trip, I want the person who can plan better to plan. I want to have a successful trip. Maybe that's not my competency.
Makes a lot of sense. That's why I don't let my husband book a trip for us, because it never comes out right.
See, you and I are very similar then. About logistics.
Absolutely. Well, how can our listeners find you? And in addition to hearing your podcast, if they're looking for coaching, get the coaching that they're looking for.
Yeah, so I always suggest the podcast, just because you're really going to get to know us at a deep level. We have so much content you're going to figure out very quickly. Number one, these are my people. Number two, these aren't my people. So just search Next Level University. We're on all the podcast platforms. We're on YouTube. And if you're interested in anything else, I would say go to the website, because we have everything there. It's nextleveluniverse.com. All the stuff is there: group coaching, one-on-one coaching. But start with the podcast. That's where we're going to get to understand us, and you'll figure out if you fit in the Next Level family. I'm sure you will if you listen to this, but I want you to feel that.
Well, I want to thank you for joining us on this third day of the new year. I want to wish you all the best of luck, and come back and visit us again in the future, okay?
My pleasure.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Thank you.